Report.
Welcome to the show. Tonight, Australia's rent crisis is unbelievable. The average rent now paid for a house in Sydney, and not just there. You won't believe the figures. What are we doing to young Australians? Plus, the opposition leader accuses the Albanese government of dividing Australia with its disastrous push for a Palestinian state.
We've got a Prime Minister who's trying to tell the Jewish community one thing and the Muslim community something different. The problem for the Prime Minister is that people can see that he's weak and he's walking both sides of the street.
Former Prime Minister John Howard has also taken a whack. I'll show you that later as well. And Peter Dutton having a red-hot go at the ABC for trying to turn the attack on him. You'll enjoy that. And is this really the spirit of the Games? For the first time in Olympics history, gold medal winners in athletics in this year's Paris Olympics will get cash prizes. Plenty more tonight, like a former Greens candidate on this show to join me in presenting, or protesting really, against this beautiful part of our country being turned into another wind factory. And my Whiskey of the Week, of course, plus Book of the Week, and the reason that you can't buy it. So much, so let's get on with it. In fact, here we go again. Hold on to your wallet. No matter how often it fails, politicians of the left just love socialism. They love thinking they can do business better than a businessman. Today, the Prime Minister made a big speech saying he couldn't leave it to business. From now on, his government is going to do the investing, and lots of it.
In this time of transformative opportunity, our government will not be an observer or a spectator. We will be a participant, a partner, an investor, an enabler. We need to act and invest at scale.
A guy that's never run a business in his life, and I think he's worked in one, reckons that he and his government can pick a winner, and he's going to pass a mega law called the Future Made in Australia Act to do it. Well, it's actually, this act is about saving Anthony Albanese's net zero plans now that we're running desperately short of electricity. Because by sheer coincidence, Albanese says the business winners that he'll be backing are mostly in green energy.
Now, here in Australia, we have massive advantages under the ground with our resources, but also in the sky with our solar resources. That will enable us to develop a green hydrogen industry, for example, that can then be used to drive green metals manufacturing in areas like aluminium.
Now, there's an obvious problem with the government thinking it knows a business winner and it will back it, and you just saw it with Albanese. It's because they have trouble separating the politics from the business. Now, I first noticed this as a young reporter when the Hawke government decided it would save the Kodak factory. It gave it $36 million, big money back then, to keep it going. Now, Kodak was making film for cameras and was threatened by cheaper stuff from overseas. Now, that actually was because it was heavily unionised, so much feather bedding there. And with 18 unions in that one plant, there was no way a union-dominated Labor government was going to let Kodak fail. So Kodak got our money and then died. Not just because it was inefficient, but because digital cameras had also just been invented. No Kodak camera film needed. Well, look at the billions of dollars our government's also threw at the Australian car industry. Where's that car industry now? Again, that wasn't business. That was just saving union jobs. And now we've got Labor governments investing in almost anything that says green on the side of the box. Again, it's not about business at all. It's the ideology. Plus, of course, wooing young voters who've got mad green visions. In fact, the previous Productivity Commission chairman last year, Michael Brennan, warned the Albanese government against trying to pick winners like this. The government was back then already saying it would invest in batteries, just when every man and his dog was doing the same. But the government didn't listen then, and it isn't listening now. 2 weeks ago, exactly the same story. Climate Change Minister Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese announced they'd spend another $1 billion to get businesses here to make our own solar panels, not that China stuff. Just when the world, and particularly China, already makes twice as many solar panels than the world can use. How many other green schemes have now hit the wall? after getting tens of millions of dollars of government help, because governments know best. There was the tidal wave generator in Broome, the geothermal power plant in Inaminka that went bust, the wave generators that sank in South Australia or hit the rocks in New South Wales, the Snowy 2.0 pumped hydro scheme that Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull swore would cost us just $2 billion and now looks like costing 10 times that. And here we go again. Lessons not learned. You heard the Prime Minister just a second ago say, well, he's going to invest in green hydrogen, for instance, which uses massive amounts of renewable energy to get hydrogen from water and use it as a clean fuel. It's untested at scale, hasn't been proven, it's highly explosive fuel, extremely expensive, but still, billionaire Andrew Forrest has been spruiking this miracle fuel like mad. And a couple of years ago, Forrest even said he'd get up a green hydrogen project in Queensland, Gibson Island.
Queensland leads Australia, where Queensland leads the world in really exciting, sustainable green industries.
Oh, the Queensland politicians behind him going, yes, 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 but another flop. Forrest seems to have given up on that idea, saying it's just the plant's in the wrong spot. The list of government-backed business failures is endless. And again, it's exactly the same problem. You can't make good business decisions when you're a politician guided more by politics than any business sense, let alone any business experience. Now, if the Prime Minister really wants to build more stuff here, and it's a great idea, the answer is quite simple. You just get out of the way. You cut taxes, you cut costs, you cut power prices, you cut red tape, you cut green tape. You just make it much easier than it is now to do business, and you let people with real business experience get at it. Make their own decisions, risking their own money, which always concentrates the mind. Just get out of the way of the new Steve Jobs or the Mark Zuckerbergs or the Gina Reinhardts, the new generation. Trust the market and not this socialism. Joining me, as on every Thursday, is Barnaby Joyce, Nationals frontbencher and former Deputy Prime Minister. Barnaby, good to see you. Making more stuff here is a great idea. But should a government really be trying to pick winners? Or when I ask a Nationals person, is that the wrong person to ask? I don't know.
Well, look, I tell you what, I am a bit perplexed about why they have to subsidise what looks like possibly Mark Cannon-Brookes and Malcolm Turnbull to make solar panels at Liddell, so that the swindle factories can even rip us off even more. So now we've got power we can't afford and billionaires getting subsidised to help create the power we can't afford. I don't know. There's logic in it somewhere, and Mr Albanese and his VIP jet, or the two VIP jets that landed in Scone and were chauffeur-driven down to Liddell, may be able to explain it to us, but it's got me bushed.
It's a good point.
I just think you're dead right. If we had cheap power, if we had cheap, reliable, affordable power, then industry would come. But you can see that every major manufacturer that is basically having to deal on a level playing field is running for the door in Australia, because our wage rates are higher. Well, nothing we can do about that.
Barnaby, I'll give you an example.
Commodities are...
The nickel industry in Australia is on its knees now. Companies, closing because of cheaper power from Indonesia, among other things. So there you go, an example right there. Foreign Minister Penny Wong, by the way, Barnaby, on Tuesday said there's now a push to give Palestinian statehood. All right?
Well, I think it is.
That's probably...
It is. She does think she's the Prime Minister, actually, but anyway.
I tend to think that she's leading Albanese by the nose. I agree with you there. But the opposition leader, Peter Dutton, he said for her to promote this idea, right, of Palestinian statehood just 6 months after the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel, when Hamas still has 130 Jewish hostages, is rewarding terrorism, and says the government is just trying to play politics. Right here, here he is.
We've got a Prime Minister who's trying to tell the Jewish community one thing and the Muslim community something different. The problem for the Prime Minister is that people can see that he's weak and he's walking both sides of the street, and he's now got a foreign minister who has damaged our international reputation. And he's got a foreign minister who's either freelancing or he supports what she says. But this is the most significant misstep by a foreign minister in our country's recent history.
What's your view, Barnaby?
She's hardly a safe set of hands, is she? I mean, before we've been always told that, you know, Penny Wong is the pick of the Labor Party and completely reliable. Well, she's just fallen off that mantle. Hamas is a terrorist organisation. So if you're going to recognise a state run by a terrorist organisation, then what happens when they visit Australia? We're going to have a 21 gun salute? Are they going to come in and walk around the blue carpet and meet people? A terrorist organisation? I mean, you've got to remember that what happened is Hamas started a war. They basically invaded Israel. They raped people. They killed people. They have got hostages, and they've never retracted. They've never relented. They've never handed them back. They've still got the hostages, and nobody wants a war. Nobody wants a war. Wars are horrendous, ugly, horrid things. But it's incumbent upon Hamas to hand back the hostages and start the process, which will start the process of bringing this war to a close, which I think everybody wants, except the people who keep holding the hostages, and that is Hamas.
Yeah, I agree. It's like trying to make a deal with Hitler in 1944 when you still got Jews in concentration camps and et cetera, et cetera. Let's make a deal, Mr. Hitler. I mean, seriously. Barnaby Joyce, you're the Shadow Minister for Veterans Affairs. I've been bombarded with complaints that the Royal Australian Air Force's Old Point Cook Base in Melbourne's west faces demolition. The 19 buildings there have been allowed to rot. Now, maintenance now is too expensive. But this was actually the original home of our Air Force in 1921. It probably has the last remaining World War II British-built hangars, plus an armaments store nearly 100 years old. We now protect the most obscure Aboriginal sites because, maybe a rock was taken from there. Shouldn't we protect this?
Yeah, and also I have to be upfront. We have to take a bit of a rap for this because it's under a coalition government. They fell into disrepair, but that's no excuse for saying now we're going to knock them over. We have to understand the predicament that Australia is in now. We are in one of the most febrile environments since the Second World War. We have China basically breathing down our neck. We've got to realise that. We have got to become as strong as possible, as quickly as possible. And we've also got to reflect on the circumstances this nation found itself in before, where Japan was trying to encircle us, which is very close to what Wang Yi's doing with his visits to Dili, to Port Moresby, to the Solomons, to Kiribati, to Vanuatu. And things such as this hangar remind us of the circumstances that Australia has been in the past. And if we don't learn from our history, we're bound to repeat it. And just like war memorials is so important, just like Anzac Day coming up, Anzac Day, not just April the 25th, Anzac Day. We see the lefties are even trying to remove that now. All this, it's not just commemoration, it's also reflection, it's also learning from your history.
Absolutely right. Barnaby Joyce, thank you so much indeed for your time. Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek is due tomorrow. I mean, it's been delayed, maybe it'll be delayed again, I don't know, but tomorrow to finally say yes or no to yet another wind farm or wind factory in a beautiful part of our country. A Korean company wants to build 42 wind towers, more than a quarter of a kilometre tall, in this part of northern Queensland, right next to a rainforest. It was called the Chalumbin project, now the Wurrura station. And what's planned there is like what's been done already in nearby Mount Emerald and at Caban, where wind towers dominate the landscape both day and night. It is bizarre also to see a Labor government contemplate a project opposed by local Aborigines.
I disagree with the windmill going ahead because they were Chumlin. Very sacred to us. It's our country, but it's got to be stopped.
Joining me is Stephen Nowakowski, a nature photographer campaigning against the Chalumbin development and a member of the Rainforest Reserves Australia. plus a former Greens candidate. Stephen, great to see you again. Where's this project up to?
Yeah, well, like you just said in your intro, tomorrow was the deadline for Tanya Plibersek to hand down a decision on this project. But we just checked the EPBC web portal, the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Act web portal, and she has again delayed that decision up until the 25th of June. So that's where this project is at the moment. So we're still in a holding pattern, really, on this project.
So it seems you've got her running and delaying and stalling. That's very interesting. What's your problem with this project?
Well, the project is like a lot of these wind farms in what we call classified remnant forests. So these are forests that have not been touched. So in the last 250 years, these are forests that have not been significantly cleared or logged or whatever. So it's classified remnant forest. And as you can see in that footage, I took that footage last week out of a helicopter. It's a wild landscape and it's an intact landscape. And these places are becoming more and more rarer on Earth. And to think that we can go and desecrate such wild places in the name of green energy is delusional. And so that's what's wrong with this project. It's a complete delusion to think that we can clear tropical forests to combat climate change. And it's a desecration of...
It's just obscene, Stephen. I went on holidays a few months ago and drove through country Victoria. And again, I mean, some of the most beautiful countryside in the state's west, you see these appalling wind towers just ruining the views. I know it's just aesthetics, but it is aesthetics. And I simply cannot understand a government that professes to care for the environment helping to wreck landscape like this. And I simply, honestly, I just don't get it. Do you?
No, I shake my head in disbelief. And it's quite interesting. Just recently in Canada, the Rocky Mountains, which are a World Heritage Site, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, they've actually put a 35-kilometre buffer around that national park against any renewable projects because of things like aesthetics. And aesthetics is a really big issue. And with this particular project at Shlumbin, it is hard up against the Wet Tropics World Heritage Area. However, in our planning regimes, wind farms and solar farms, well, they're not really farms, they're factories, they can actually be built hard up against World Heritage Areas. They are not designated as a sensitive site. So in the planning code, things like jails or shopping centres or childcare centres are classified as a sensitive site. So a wind turbine needs to be built 1.5 kilometres away from that sensitive site. But a World Heritage Area is not classified as a sensitive site. Right. And therefore wind turbines can be built hard up on the boundary of a World Heritage Area. That's how stupid the planning looks. Yes.
Go figure. And anyone going to your websites about the various groups that are opposing this will see that it's got overwhelming public opposition to it. So no wonder the Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, has just delayed it again, saying what she'll do. But this has got to be stopped. Steve Nowakowski, thank you for fighting and thank you for coming on the show. Unbelievable. After the break, talk about unbelievable, new figures. What people are paying now for rents in each city. This is a crime against the young and the poor. Plus, winners in the Paris Olympics. The athletes there in athletics, they're going to get cash prizes. Is this really the Olympic spirit? You know, both Labor and the Liberals have got to deal with a social disaster for younger Australians and poorer ones. Rents. Rents have just gone crazy. I mean, the average rent now for a house in Sydney has jumped to $750 a week. Now, it is cheaper in other cities, but not by that much. I mean, Canberra is $685, Perth $650 a week, Brisbane 620. In Melbourne, it's quite a bit less for some reason, but 570 a week is still steep. Now, you'll know as well as I that this is driven in large part by the federal government's insane decision to bring in more than 500,000 immigrants a year when we're not building anything like enough houses for them. Joining me is Louise Elliott, business consultant and Hobart City Councillor, and James McPherson, the Late Debate, a host there here on Sky News at 10 o'clock tonight, actually. You can catch him again. James, to me, this isn't just a political issue for the parties, with the Greens snapping up the young, because I'm not surprised they're getting more support from the young. It's a moral one and a social one. We're making a terrible mistake by making it almost impossible for many young Australians to buy a home, but also even to rent one.
Yeah, the housing crisis, Andrew, is a crisis entirely of the government's own making. According to the IPA, last year was the first time in history that Australia received more than 1 million immigrants. And a recent poll by the IPA found 71% of Australians believe mass migration is making it harder, if not impossible, to afford a home. And clearly, they're not wrong. So this problem we've got is that the governments seem to want to drive the economy through increased migration rather than increased productivity gains, which, of course, are far more difficult to achieve, especially if you want to appease unions. So I say again, we have a housing crisis, but it's not come out of nowhere. It's a crisis manufactured by the government, and that could be solved by the government if they just did something about migration.
Louise, Louise Elliott, what makes me say it's a social disaster is not just that, you've got to give people reasonably affordable housing. You've got to make sure that's there. I mean, that's just a basic thing. But also, particularly with buying a house, you've got to give young Australians, and I call me sexist, but particularly young men, that sense of responsibility that they've got something that's their stake in Australia, and they better start settling down and helping to pay for that asset. I mean, it's a socialising influence, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely, and I agree. Anyone that wants to buy a house and is able and willing to work hard should be able to. It should be within reach. It should be achievable. And I agree, at times like this, it's not just more housing we need. We need more hospital beds, we need more schools, we need more infrastructure. We need to, therefore, have really hyper-focused immigration. It can't be open slather. We need to be very targeted in what we're doing, because the infrastructure and the basics that we need aren't there. And when it comes to rental affordability, Tasmania, in my neck of the woods, we're often the most unaffordable because our salaries are so much lower. So at the moment we're sitting on Hobart, it's about $550 a week, which is extravagant. I mean, when I was lucky enough to buy my first home as a single female, rents were a quarter of what they are today. So something needs to be turned around. It needs to be turned around quickly.
Oh, absolutely correct. I, for the life of me, cannot understand why this Labor government has just slammed the door shut on this mass immigration until we've got enough housing for Australians right now. James, a huge cultural change for the Olympics, or so it seems to me. The Paris Games in July. It's going to be the first ever in the Olympics, 128 years, to offer a cash prize for the winner in the athletics events. Second and third will get a cash prize 4 years later. $76,000 as well as the gold medal. The cash is coming to the World Athletics. Here is its president, Lord Sebastian Coe.
While we are recipients of broadcast revenue from an Olympic Games, that they are in large part the reason why we are in receipt of that revenue.
James McPherson, I know that Olympics is, anyone who wins has already got it made, but offering cash prizes, a little too crass against the Olympic spirit?
I don't know, Andrew. $75,000 for a lifetime of sacrifice and effort is not a lot of money. And while this will upset the purists, the fact is, professionals have been playing at the Olympics for some time. I remember when the Dream Team, the USA basketball team, full of multi-millionaires, played at the Olympic Games, and people said, oh, this isn't good. And yet that was the greatest basketball the world had ever seen. As well as that, governments have been offering cash incentives to their own Olympic Olympic athletes for quite some time in various parts of the world. And on top of that, so many other people are making money from the Olympics. I mean, broadcasters make money, sponsors make money, vendors make money. The only people not making any money are the athletes. So for them to get a little bit of a cut, I don't think it's going to do any harm, and it's well justified, I believe.
I haven't seen too many poor gold medalists in athletics who've, on the right, never made a bean from the sport. I don't know, but Louise Elliott, maybe I suppose James is right. It's all money, money, money now.
Well, I must admit, when I heard the news of that on the radio this morning, I felt a sort of uneasiness. I think it's because we do think of the Olympics and we think of pride in our country and the ultimate reward being representing your country and achieving great things. But I guess there is an inevitability to it. I mean, people have always, like you've said, they've made incomes indirectly through their success. But it does feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I guess it is something, it's the way of the world, and I guess we're not used to having it so overt when it comes to the Olympics.
It's such a strange change from days I remember when they used to go hunting the officials for anyone that might have earned $1 from their sport. You're out, you're out. And now, no, can we give you some money? I mean, it's just ridiculous. President Joe Biden has just given a big hint the United States might drop its most serious charges against Australian WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange and let him walk free with a minor charge, even though there was seemed a random way for Biden to announce it. Here he is.
Do you have a response to Australia's request that you end Julian Assange's prosecution?
We're considering it. James, the US wants Assange to stand trial for leaking secret information, like US military logs and all that kind of thing. Assange, to get out of this, spent 7 years hiding the Ecuadorian embassy in London until he was finally kicked out 4 years ago and arrested again, been since in a British jail, seeing if he'll be extradited. Has he suffered enough? Is this a free speech issue? Where are you on this?
Yeah, look, Andrew, I understand why people are saying, look, enough is enough. We're sick of hearing about it. Just let the guy go. But the fact is, has he suffered enough? Well, he's only suffered because he's sought to avoid justice, or at least his day in court. So I believe that he should face court for what happened. He helped to hack into Pentagon computers. He didn't publish articles. He just dumped information on the internet without regard for how it would affect people who were named in that information. So I think America should pursue this because it's vital that nations are able to secure their secrets.
Except, Louise, his barrister, one of them, Greg Barnes, told me once, look, there's an important principle here. Here's America trying to put in jail someone who's not a citizen and not in America for stuff that they think should have been illegal in America. I mean, how does that work? Where's the reach? I don't know. Where are you on this?
Well, from my perspective, I think that, like James, there needs to be consequences for action. You can't just avoid your day in court and drag it out long enough that people get sick of it. I think the middle ground in terms of reaching an agreement so that whatever Australia government has some sort of parameters put around what can happen, and if he is to serve prison, it's in Australia. But I'm actually firstly worried about why we're giving so much weight to Joe Biden's comment. To me, it looked as if it was a comment that it was a default answer, he says, when he actually hasn't understood the question and he doesn't know what else to say. So I'll just say, we're considering it.
That is a very good point. James McPherson and Louise Elliott, thank you very much to you both. After the break, Donald Trump just set a world record for political donations with a single dinner. But don't be fooled, because it's actually proved that Conservative parties are, believe it or not, the champions of the poor. It's not the left, it's Conservatives. Amazing proof of that after this. Prince Harry is now in real danger of being kicked out of the United States. When he and Meghan Markle moved to the US, Harry had to fill in a visa that asked, have you ever taken drugs? Because you can actually get banned if you say yes. Now, a district court judge in Washington has asked for Harry's visa application, and the Biden administration says it's now handed it over. This is in a case brought by the Heritage Foundation, which says the law must apply to celebrities as well as Joe Everybody, because the thing here is that Harry actually said in his memoirs, Spare, that he'd taken all sorts of drugs. So, whoa. Joining me now is Sean Spicer, the first White House spokesman for the US President, Donald Trump. Sean Spicer, thank you so much for joining us. Is this case with Prince Harry getting much attention in the United States?
You know, to be honest with you, Andrew, it's not. You piqued my interest with this now. I feel like I'm actually now intrigued by so much of this subject that, you know, thankfully you're bringing the news to the U.S.
I wonder whether it's because perhaps America's used to celebrities getting a free pass.
You know, it's funny, though. It's a great question. When you brought this up in your show, I didn't even realize it was a question that got asked. I sort of am intrigued where it goes from here. But it's also interesting in terms of what's going on in our country. We've got an open southern border where drugs are coming in. We've got Kamala Harris and Joe Biden decriminalizing marijuana and talking about how they want to expunge the records of so many. So it's interesting. On the one hand, we're asking foreigners to come in. At the other time, the Democratic Party in this country is doing everything they can to destigmatize it. And in the case of the southern border, allow drugs to come in.
Yep. I wonder where this is going to go. But talking about the celebrities, Donald Trump, I mean, this is just astonishing. It must be some sort of record, Sean. Donald Trump, in one fundraising dinner with the rich, has just raised an amazing $77 million Australian, or just over 50 million US for his election campaign. What does that tell you?
Well, the first thing it tells me is no matter whether it's U.S. or Australian, it's well beyond anything I'll ever have. So that's the first thing. No matter what currency, it's well beyond anything I'll ever see. That's number one. But the thing that was so interesting to me, you talk about what we watch and what we don't. In the U.S., I don't know, what was it, 10 days ago? Every major media outlet was going nuts about the fact that President Biden and two other ex-presidents, Obama and Clinton, joined with a bunch of holiday celebrities at Radio City Music Hall in downtown New York City and raised $26 million. And it was talked about what a big record it was. Stephen Colbert from our late night programs was there. Some of the Hollywood leftists came out and did a podcast from there. And everybody was celebrating what a great haul this was for Obama. 3 presidents, a bunch of Hollywood leftists, and $26 million at one night in New York City. Donald Trump breaks every record of every party in one night, raises over $50 million in one event at one person's house. And the next thing you know, it was like, well, here's what's wrong with this. And here it was a bunch of rich people. And I'm like, wait a second. It was rich people in New York City. When it was rich Hollywood elites and progressives supporting Joe Biden with 2 ex-presidents, it was such a great thing to be celebrated. When Donald Trump eclipsed it by basically double, here's all the problems with that. But what it does show is that everybody's getting on board. Right. We've talked about all these factions and the different people that were funding some of the primary challenges to Donald Trump, whether it's Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis. The big guys all got together in one night and said, we're united behind Donald Trump and we're going to move forward to win. That just shows you take that event combined with the major haul that Trump had with the RNC in the month of March. And it shows you that low dollars and small dollars on the Republican conservative side are united behind him going into the general election. And that when it really comes down to it, money's not going to be a problem.
But Sean, let's talk about these headline, fundraising events obscures a really fascinating change in conservative parties in the West, especially in the United States, but also here in Australia with our Liberal Party and our National Party. These conservative parties, Republicans your way, Liberals here, used to be seen as parties of the rich. But in the United States, for instance, the Republican Party has changed that dramatically, and especially with Donald Trump, of all things, which might seem counterintuitive given his own wealth. About 50 years ago, with Jimmy Carter becoming president, here's the vote in the Republican vote in red. Yes, the Republicans did get most of the support from the rich, just 38% from the poorest voters. But that has steadily changed over the years, and now polls show Donald Trump actually beating Joe Biden in support among the very poorest voters. What's going on here?
Yeah, the realignment, it's so great that you brought this up. You think about this. The Democratic Party, which built itself as being the party of the working poor, of the working men and women, of the blue collar in the United States, manufacturing jobs, other blue collar jobs, suddenly is the party of the rich elite. It's the Hollywoods. It's the tech venture capitalists and the corporate elites, right? It's the working men and women that Donald Trump is now championing. And the parties have literally done a flip. And so if when you look at this, and it's amazing how quick the Democrats abandoned the working men and women. They literally are now the party of the rich, leftist, elite progressives, government leaders and academia leaders and corporate leaders and Hollywood leaders and industry titans. All the people with the money and the power are behind the Democratic Party. It's the men and women who are working day in and day out that are behind the Republican Party and Donald Trump right now. You take an issue like trade, for example. Donald Trump put it on its head and said he's going to champion policies that support the men and women. And it's funny, you talk about like even unions. It's the union leadership that's supporting the Democrats, the union workers, the men and women who are going to work every day and becoming the backbone of America, the people who Joe Biden claims to champion, are supporting the Republican Party and Donald Trump. Because the thing that's so interesting about Trump is that, yes, he's rich, but he's worked around these people as a hotelier, as a real estate investor that had, construction workers that he was around, as a restaurant owner. He sees them every day. I've walked hotels with the guy. He stops, he shakes hands, he talks to them, he engages with them. This is to him his, we talk about the rallies. His real focus group when I was with him on the 2016 campaign was when he walked through a room and shook the hands and engaged with the workers, the waiters, the waitresses, the service staff. And he would talk about issues that were affecting them and how he could champion their causes. So the funny part about this is that if you think about who's leading the efforts in the United States in their respective parties, Trump is a guy who has spent his lifetime around the bedrock of the American worker. Joe Biden has been in elected office his whole life. He's had a staff that's been paid for by the government surround him. He's never worked an honest day in his life when it comes to running a business or putting a paycheck out. He doesn't know what that's like. So he doesn't know how to even champion it if he wanted to. Donald Trump knows what it's like to sign the front and the back of a paycheck.
Sean Spicer, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Always great to be with you, Andrew. Thank you.
And by the way, the increase in Donald Trump's support from the working class isn't just poor whites. There's also been a big drift from the Democrats of Latino voters and increasingly, not as much as, but from black American voters as well. It's a very interesting phenomenon. After the break, Peter Dutton gives a big whack to the ABC. And John Howard, not happy with Penny Wong at all. Plus my whiskey and my book of the week, which I just found has been quietly banned. I'll tell you why. Fascinating story. Last night, opposition leader Peter Dutton accused Anthony Albanese of not doing enough to fight this incredible wave of Jew hatred ever since mobs at the Sydney Opera House chanted, "Where's the Jews?" He contrasted that to how Liberal Prime Minister John Howard stood in front of angry farmers and demanded gun control after the Port Arthur massacre.
Whilst no one was killed during the protests on October 9, thank God, the events at the Sydney Opera House were akin to a Port Arthur moment in terms of their social and national significance.
The Prime Minister today acted like this was outrageous and bit back.
Peter Dutton's reference to Port Arthur, I think people will draw their own conclusions there about that. I did see those comments and was somewhat taken aback. I think when it comes to the Middle East, these are complex issues. They do not need people talking up the heat. They need people turning it down.
Totally predictable. ABC reporters today also attacked Peter Dutton for that and demanded to know if he was ignoring warnings last year by the head of ASIO to tone down the debate to preserve peace here. Dutton wasn't going to cop that from a taxpayer-funded media organisation that's been hijacked by the left. It was spicy.
Mike Burgess last year said words matter when maintaining social cohesion in Australia. Did you breach that advice in your speech?
Well, as Mike Burgess said, no. Again, the Labor Party were running this line through the ABC last year, and Mike Burgess came out to say he was making no reference to comments that I made whatsoever. So I'm not going to be tarnished by the ABC. I'm not going to cower because of the ABC and other left-wing media organisations in our country. My job is to stand up for what is best in our best interests.
Joining me on Culture Wars is Rowan Dean, editor of the Spectator Australia, excellent magazine, and host of the equally excellent Outsiders on Sky News every Sunday at 9 a.m. I never miss it. Rowan, what did you make of that spray?
Thanks, Andrew. Well, the first thing to say is that the fact that Anthony Albanese didn't understand the analogy, let alone didn't understand the ramifications of October 9th and the Opera House, what the events that occurred that night, is serious enough. First of all, about that analogy, it is a very apt analogy for the following reasons. I remember Port Arthur very well. The nation was in shock, and the reason the nation was in shock was fear. The fear that something that we thought could never happen in Australia, that we thought happened overseas in America or in third world countries, this sort of mayhem, murder, actually could happen on our shores. That shocked the nation. And John Howard was smart enough and canny enough, probably canny is the wrong word, empathetic enough to understand that Australians were shocked, terrified, and needed some kind of leadership to show the way forward. The analogy with October 9th is an absolutely pertinent one in that less than 48 hours after we were all reeling from the most barbaric attack on humans, on Jews, on women, on children, on babies, that any of us had ever dreamt we would, or in our worst nightmares, we would see in our lifetimes. Within 48 hours of that, Andrew, on the steps of the Opera House, you had a mob, a lynch mob, perhaps, a pogrom, perhaps. Certainly, were I one who had family or relatives or any association with the people who only less than 48 hours before had been butchered in the most barbaric fashion, I would have been terrified, absolutely terrified, to see those mobs on the steps of the Opera House, remembering that the Opera House was supposed to be a commemoration of those dead people, to somehow show empathy for those deaths. To have a mob, a out-of-control mob, screaming hatred and vilification for Jewish people was utterly unbelievable, shocked the nation, and in the same way that we all felt terrified that, hey, could this happen in Australia after Port Arthur, we were all thinking, and I'm certain every Jewish person was thinking, I can't believe that this could ever happen in Australia. What has happened? Fear, confusion, anger, terror, all those emotions. And what did Anthony Albanese do?
Where was the Prime Minister?
Just ignored it. Exactly.
It's unbelievable.
Just ignored it, showed no leadership,
stunned.
did nothing.
I'm still stunned, Rowan. And I'm still asking that question you just put. You know, how could this happen in my country? I mean, it's staggering and frightening to me. And I'm not even Jewish. It's terrifying. But you're speaking of John Howard. He also today had a go at the way Albanese and Foreign Minister Penny Wong have been dealing with this. In an interview with Aaron Molan, it's going to run on Sky News tomorrow at 5 p.m. Listen to this.
I think this government, and Penny Wong in particular, has demonstrably failed to react in the right way to the attack on Israel on the 7th of October last year. We must never, ever sound as though we don't care about the re-emergence of anti-Semitism.
Rowan Dean, isn't it nice to hear an adult voice in this debate, someone really putting it straight there, no longer in politics, and it just sounds sincere and thought through?
Well, that's the very voice that has been missing all along. John Howard, as I said, had that ability as just an average Aussie to understand and empathise and get to the bottom line of these really important moral issues. Contrast that mature response from John Howard with this kind of undergraduate Sydney University socialist feminist course that Penny Wong never seems to have left behind her, in which we hear about, we've got to recognise a Palestinian state. We've got to not recognise Jerusalem. We've got to fund UNRWA. We've got to send our own envoy over to investigate because those dreadful Israelis won't possibly be able to investigate the tragic aid workers' deaths. I mean, every utterance from Penny Wong, all supported, by the way, by Anthony Albanese and the rest of the Labor Party, and even some of the Teals, every utterance from Penny Wong denigrates Israel, shows a kind of sneering undergraduate distrust of one of our most important allies, and more importantly, of the Jewish community in this nation. And it just appalls me that Labor are prepared to let her run wild.
When you call it out, they go, how dare you call us out for doing exactly what we're doing? I mean, seriously, Rowan, there's something sick going on, and Labor moderates, the right need to stand up and confront this. Rowan Dean, thank you so much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. And to take it from me, Book of the Week. Well, I did actually want to recommend a book, Camp of the Saints, by French author and explorer Jean Raspail. Sorry about this. I was doing a book review, so pardon that. Now, Jean Raspail actually won all France's top literary awards, even the Legion of Honour, would you believe? And in 1973, he wrote this Camp of the Saints, a really prophetic book. And I'll tell you why in a second, because this is the problem. Got great reviews. The director of French intelligence service actually gave a copy of the book to Ronald Reagan, who apparently said he was terribly impressed by it. But Robinson's Bookshops, as you know, each week puts up my recommendations on its webpage. You'll find the past ones and some others all there. Go there, click on my link on the left. Great tips, great service. Anyway, Robinson's Bookshop tells me they've tried to order some in, knowing I wanted to tip it, wanting to have it on stock. They can't. Quiet censorship. It's not available. In fact, even secondhand, the cheapest I found in English was $380 worth. This very thing, $380 worth. And this cheapest new one of this, more than $600 because no one will publish it. And it's even soft cover. Look at that. And why? Because in this book, 51 years ago, Jean Raspail wrote what would Europe do if 1 million immigrants from the third world came in boats, and not like now, in a few boats at a time, but all at once, 1 million of them. And what he predicted was essentially exactly what has happened, except frog in a boiling water. Europe, full of self-loathing, lacking confidence, didn't dare resist, got swamped, got changed, and for good, as France is already finding. The book, Too Close to the Bone, now called Racist, no publisher dares republish it. Amazon even cancelled its ebook version, would you believe? Jean Raspail died 4 years ago. Sent me a copy of his book in French with an inscription. It's in French. I got someone to translate it for me. It says, for Andrew, hoping without believing it, that this book will remain a fiction. But end of game in 2045, 2055. Good luck. My whiskey of the week, Highland Park. Great whiskey, sherry peaty fruit from the Orkneys. Tang of the Sea. That's it from me. Now is Sherry Markson.